This is our project on distributed consent. So what we're doing is thinking about the limitations of the individual consent paradigm for sharing data online. And so we built some models that kind of look at a different modality of thinking about consent on a group level. So what we're trying to do is think about the role of consent, what it's supposed to be doing, what its job is. And we're going to ask a couple of questions to interrogate whether or not individual consent is the proper framework to be sharing your data online. So for example, this is a photo of me and my brothers. We're pretty cute. This is baby me and my brothers with some pretty rockin' haircuts. And this photo is of all of us. So typically the way that individual consent operates is that I agree to terms and service on a platform like Facebook, and that sort of activity of agreeing to the terms of service is my consent to share information with that platform. So the question here is like, is this photo mine? Do I have the right to sort of share this broadly, even though it implicates others? Okay, so what is consent's job? So consent is this really important tool, and it does like a lot of normative work. It has this kind of like moral magic, and it transforms sort of things that are impermissible into permissible ones. And this is really important. So like when in activities like surgery or something, you're putting your autonomy really at risk in order to be in a situation where you're really vulnerable, and you need to be able to do that in a space that sort of has like strict constraints around it. And even sort of beyond these notions, there's like a lot of really interesting research about sort of what is legitimate consent. But in this sort of case of the data transaction with social data online, I think a bigger issue is that data itself, especially social data, is not discrete. It's sort of socially distributed, and it implicates certain people that may not have originally consented to sharing information on these platforms. So we had a little bit of fun, and we created a kind of simulation of an online social network, and we made up some security settings that are sort of on a single platform and on a cross platform. And these are really meant to kind of represent the distributed nature of data on these platforms. So basically what they're doing is saying, like, if I have a really strong taste for privacy, I want to be able to say to this platform or to the sort of cross-platform thing that I don't want to associate with people who have different privacy norms as I do, because I don't want them to sort of leak my data. So the reason we're kind of doing this is to see if me as a user who has sort of a high taste for privacy can remain on the platform while sort of limiting the observability of my profile from leaking with my social network. So we have kind of 3 takeaways from our fun little simulation. So basically we simulated an attack of spyware on a social network. And we had a big attack, and we showed that sort of with the adoption of this sort of conditional consent, this new privacy setting, that sort of with low levels of adoption, that you can kind of create this protected subnetwork. So this is sort of like a group of people who all care about privacy a lot. And this kind of can help you protect yourself from your friends, but also your friends' friends. And then the other kind of cool thing is that with sort of weaker attacks, we saw this really weird kind of phenomena where you kind of, if you have low security settings, you can still kind of benefit from people who have a taste for privacy. So you get this kind of herd privacy where you're protected by your friends. And what we saw is that you're really, if you're an agent in this system, you're really only as protected as the least protected user who's in your network. So they're kind of an entry point for observability to third parties. And then in our kind of cross-platform model, because we don't live in a discrete space that's only one social media platform, what we saw was really interesting. So the sort of takeaway here is that you're really only as secure as your weakest security settings on any single platform. And this is really where I kind of see the limits of this individual consent, is that it takes a lot of coordination to be able to actually limit the flow of data, of social data online. So this is kind of our straw man in good philosophical turn. So consent is this really important tool. I'm still not quite sure that it's the right tool to be used in this context, but if it is, then maybe it should reflect the sort of distributed social ecology that we actually live in, and good privacy policies and good privacy practices will probably need both top-down, bottom-up understanding of the interdependencies that we live in. Thanks.